warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we will talk about the limbic system, which is part of the neurological system. It's more part of it. My name is Laila, and let's start. Bismillah. So the limbic system main functions are memory and emotions, and it will be also responsible for olfaction, homeostasis, and the feel of hunger or an emotion in general. What is responsible for example, the homeostasis or autonomic nervous system, neuroendocrine control, the hormone secretion? It will be hypothalamus, and olfaction will be taken part by olfactory cortex. We will have the hippocampus will be mainly responsible for memory, and emotions will be the responsibility for amygdala. So in general, we have these functions for the limbic system, and it's more concerned with the psychiatric disorders. So for example, if we have any lesion, we could have memory loss, for example, because of the hippocampus malfunctioning, for example, or lesion. So for facial muscle control and expression, here it just show you that not just the muscles of the face, any muscle in our body or any action we are taking, it's not just the motor part of it or the sensation. We also have the emotional part of it. So for example, if someone have an depression or a psychiatric disorder, they will not have a normal smile, or as we call it, real smile. They and how we know it, there's something called Duchenne smile, and this is when the corner of your eye will be wrinkled when you are smiling. So this will be absent if you have any emotional lesion or emotional disease, for example. Okay, so let's start with the structures of the limbic system. So the main components of limbic system, they are mainly the limbic cortex, which is consists of the cingulate gyrus, the parahippocampal, and the gyri, and the uncus as well. We have something called hippocampal formation, which is usually referred to as hippocampus. So that is the dendrite gyrus, the hippocampus, and the speculum. We have the amygdala, we have the nucleus accumbens, we have the olfactory cortex, and we have the brain stem for sure, and basal ganglia. So here we have the limbic loop, which is called the limbus because it's the edge between the neocortex and the hypothalamus. So it is consists of what we said in short, the cingulate gyrus, parahippocampal gyri, and uncus, and it's the area between the hypothalamus and the cortex or neocortex, and it is part of the cortical structures for limbic system. So we have the limbic loop, which we said in short. We have the hippocampal formation, which has three structures. Again, dendrite gyrus, hippocampus, and the speculum. Septal area, which has the nucleus accumbens and olfactory area. Coming to the subcortical structure would be the amygdaloid, the nuclear complex or amygdala, reticular formation, hypothalamus, and the anterior nucleus of thalamus and the habenular nuclei. So again, what are the functions of the limbic system? In general, they are memory and emotion, and any response such as feeding or hunger, anything related to emotions, it is the responsibility of the limbic system. So we have the function of if hippocampus, for example, is memory, and it's controlled by something called plasticity, and plasticity is plasticity is when there is one neuron that's usually stimulated by a single memory or single information, and this is the way our memory, our Memory is formed, yes. And it is responsible also for the long-term potentiation or learning. It is responsible for olfaction. And no, sorry, it's just responsible for memory formation, and it can regulate corticosteroid release as well. The amygdala is the one responsible for emotions and hunger feeling, or also the autonomic nervous system centers such as your blood pressure, your blood control, your blood sugar control, and the temperature of your body, for example. And we have some areas in the limbic system that communicate between the limbic system and the cortex or the neocortex. Okay. So we have here the first area I want to talk about is the cingulate gyrus. And the cingulate gyrus is receiving its information in general from the cortex and receive the information also from the hypothalamus, and will give output to the cerebral cortex and the hippocampus. And it is important for the association with the gyrus. So, for example, if you have a lesion to the cingulate gyrus, you will have what we call a kinetic mutism, which is basically the association from environments. You are not comatose, but you are not connected to the surroundings around you. Its location is above the corpus callosum, and it's important because it's involved in decision making, and it's a really unique structure. We have also the hypothalamus, which is responsible for homeostasis, autonomic nervous system, and also for limbic output and input as well. And we have many structures into the limbic system, such as the basal ganglia and the subcallosal gyri, paraterminal gyri, and here we have the entorhinal cortex, which is responsible for olfaction, and it also take part in memory formation, and it's part of Bab's circuit, as well as cingulate gyrus. We will take it in a minute. And its input coming from the olfactory bulb, and its output will be towards the dentate gyrus and the hippocampus. Okay, so the fornix is basically the tail of the hippocampus, and beside it we can see the amygdala and the mammillary body. And the mammillary body is part of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is divided to three areas, which are anterior and the tuber area and the posterior area. So we have the mammillary body in the anterior area of the hypothalamus. So we have different theories and different studies and developing of the idea of the limbic system throughout the years. And one of the scientists were Babis, who created or discovered or add to the theory of the limbic system that it is involved into behavioral and emotion control, and it's called Babis circle. So Babis circle is basically it's a start and end into the hippocampus, and for memory and emotion. So what's basically the function for limbic system? We have diseases that will affect the circle, which are, for example, Alzheimer disease. And this circle basically starts from the pyramidal cells of the hippocampus, and then going to the fornix, the mammillary body, and then which is basically the hypothalamus, and then the mammillothalamic tract, coming to anterior thalamic nuclei, then cingulate gyrus, and from cingulate gyrus through the cingulum and entroidal cortex into the hippocampus again. So the circuit of PABIS, it has inputs from the cingulate gyrus and parahippocampal gyrus, as well amygdala, and has outputs to amygdala as well. So why is it important and significant? It will add to our actions, emotion, or our memories will be influenced by emotion because of the circuit. Then we have the theory of Paul Macklin, and it's basically that amygdala and the connection between it and the prefrontal cortex, which is the area for decision making and planning. It is what make humans significant and clever mammals or creatures. So we have many inputs and outputs to the amygdala. So the input for amygdala will come from the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and olfactory bulb as well. It will come from the anterior limbic cortex, the unimodal sensory cortex, and the brainstem. And it will project to ventral strium, thalamus, hypothalamus again, to the brainstem, hippocampus, anterior limbic cortex, and primary unimodal sensory cortex. So it has many connections, which signify how it will. It is important, and as well, it will add and rely emotions to our actions, such as fear, anxiety, or aggression. And it's really involved into decision making as well. And the facial expression will take place also by the act of the amygdala as well. The amygdala, as we said, the input and output part of it, and it is into the anterior part of the hippocampus. So we said Babis circuit, and it's again, its inputs is from the cingulum, cingulate gyrus, and the parahippocampal gyrus and amygdala, and it will project neurons toward the amygdala as well, or information toward the amygdala. So there was, or there is a syndrome that is found when there was excision of the temporal loop from monkeys done by two scientists, Clover and Bausi, and they found the following criteria, or the following symptoms and signs. So basically, I found this picture about it. So when there is excision of the temporal loop, the patient will have memory loss, will have as well hyperphagia, or will eat a lot, and will have agnosia as well. So agnosia is just not recognizing what the objects around you are. Also, they will have hyperorality, or they will talk a lot. They will have diminished fear response, and you can diagnose it by MRI to know if this is there is a lesion to the temporal bone, to the temporal loop, and you can manage it accordingly. Anyway, so we know now the input and output for amygdala. The hippocampus input will be from entroidal cortex, the thalamus, the cingulate gyrus, and the amygdala as well. And its output will be to the cerebral fornix, such as hypothalamus, amygdala, and memory bodies in general. So this is for the hippocampus, and it is part of Babis circuit, as we said. and it will be responsible for the memory formation. Then we have the input for the hippocampus. They are, or the amygdala. So the input for hippocampus will be the amygdala, the prefrontal and orbital cortex, temporal cortex, and entorhinal and parahippocampal cortex, as well the cingulum and cingulate gyri. And the output will be to fornix, mammillothalamic tract, and mammillary bodies, anterior nuclei of the thalamus, and to the entorhinal cortex and amygdala as well. And the amygdala input that we talked about, the thalamus, the olfactory bulb, the hippocampus, and the cingulate. The outputs will be striae terminalis, and this either from the ventromedial nuclei of the hypothalamus, which will be responsible for feeding. Part of the hypothalamus will control also the autonomic nervous system, or from the corpus striatum by a nucleus accumbens, and it will be responsible for the motor function. It also will project toward the hippocampus, and it will be responsible for the memory and learning, the prefrontal association cortex as well, and this is important for planning, as we said, and this is what make humans unique creatures. We also have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the cingulate gyri. We have the orbitofrontal cortex, and all these structures um, is just important to help the amygdala or in communicating with amygdala to add an emotion to our actions. And we have four major neurotransmitter systems. So we have the midbrain dopaminergic projections. And dopamine is the happiness hormone, as we know. So if we don't have it, we will have depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and many diseases. And basically, the midbrain dopaminergic projections will come from the ventral tegmental area, and the septa nuclei. I don't know what is the SNC actually, but an important thing, it will via the medial forebrain bundle, it will go to the prefrontal association area, the medial or orbitofrontal cortex, cingulate gyri, and the ventral striatum, amygdala, and the hippocampus, and will this hormone will affect our emotions and the way we store information and the memory and the learning. So, for example, it will add the motivation to our learning or an emotion to our actions. So basically, the medial forebrain bundle is located here. Then we have the ascending stereogenic projections from the dorsal and median raphe nuclei, and it will be responsible for serotonin. And it's also conveyed through medial forebrain bundle and dorsal longitudinal fasciculi. And it's going to the amygdala, the hippocampus, and to the cortex as well. Dorsal longitudinal fasciculus is also conveying the autonomic signals from the hypothalamus. So we can see why it will, for example, if someone is taking SSRI, will have a mood disorder or have an anxiety for example. And this is its location in the brain. Then we have the noradrenergic projection coming from the lucus ceruleans, so to the medial forebrain bundle, and then it will convey to the cerebral cortex and limbic association areas that we talked about, and the limbic cortical and subcortical structures. The last one is the basal forebrain cholinergic projection, and it will be conducted by the diverse pathways to the neocortex and the limbic cortex, amygdala, and hippocampus. And they are, we start to lose them in Alzheimer's disease, for example. So this is a brief description for each part of the bundles. So we have the medial forebrain bundle, for example. It is crossing longitudinally through the lateral area from the hypothalamus and connect the midbrain with or midbrain tegmentum with various components of the limbic system. And we have the dorsal longitudinal fasciculi, which connect the periventricular zone of the hypothalamus and the central part of periaqueductal or central gray matter of the midbrain. Um, um, and that's it, just the last thing. In limbic cortex, they are supplied by anterior cerebral artery, posterior cerebral artery, and middle cerebral artery, which will supply the amygdala and uncus. The posterior cerebral artery will supply the parahippocampal gyri, and the anterior will supply the cingulate gyrus.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Would you like me to stop the recording?
Yes.